Hello and welcome to the TCM YouTube channel where over the next hour, half hour even, going great, isn't it? We're going to try something new. Yes, that's right. Instead of tweeting shit on Twitter, we're going to actually have to justify our opinions. And we're going to talk about all the biggest cricketing things going on in the world right now. Joining me to do this week, I've got three people who are putting their lives on the line by agreeing to do this and take part in this absolute shambles. We've got Somerset fan and journalist Alex Duffell, Hampshire fan and long-suffering Chelsea fan Harrison Burridge, and then journalist and commentator, I've shoved that one in there for you, Rob Rush. How are we, boys?
All good up until you said putting lives in our hands. That kind of put us all off, I think.
I was hovering over the leave.
I thought I'd scare you right at the start, get it out of the way, just.
Mate, you scared us when your fucking face popped up on the Zoom. Like, we were already scared.
Thank you so much for that. So much confidence in this, isn't it? Right, let's talk cricket before I get absolutely annihilated and roasted. And we're going to start with the T20 World Cup because that's all everyone's talking about at the moment because it basically is the only cricket going on. And we're going to start with you, Harrison. What are your reflections on the tournament so far? What's impressed you? Just your general thoughts to begin with.
I think it's been one of the best major tournaments I've seen in my lifetime, especially on the back of the World Cup we had last year, where it got a bit predictable towards the end. You knew the team batting second would probably win and had that feel to it. But this time there's been a lot of unpredictability about it. You've had the upsets. You've had the other day when India beat Bangladesh, you thought it was going to be an upset, but then the bigger team pulled through. So there's just that excitement to it that we didn't have last time, and that's just really caught my attention.
And would you agree, Alex? Do you think that the excitement that's surrounding this T20 World Cup is like we've not seen in a T20 World Cup for a while now?
Yeah, I think there's two sides to this T20 World Cup. There's been the on-field action, which I don't think anyone will disagree with. I think it's been by far probably certainly the best T20 World Cup ever. And it's probably pushing up towards the best World Cup ever in terms of the on-field action. Then you have the other side of this World Cup, which has been the off-field, the rain. We're playing a World Cup in Australia in November. It's not really, it's the start of their season. You look at the Sheffield Shield, you get photos from grade cricket. They're all wearing jumpers and long sleeves. It'd be like having a World Cup in England in May. We just wouldn't do it. And yet I appreciate they've had some unusual weather as well, but even so, it does seem a little bit strange. And I think that's been translated in the attendances. The fans, Australian cricket fans, are not in cricket mode yet. It's not really cricket season for them yet. So to ask them to pack out these massive stadiums for Namibia against Sri Lanka was never really going to happen. And as a result, you have had very empty stadiums. It has looked a bit soulless at times. And the whole atmosphere surrounding it probably has been a little bit dampened as a result. But I do think that's partly just because of the amount of T20 cricket we've had as well.
Yeah, Rob, would you agree that the atmospheres and the decision to play it when they've decided to play it has impacted this World Cup in a negative way? Or do you think that maybe it's actually just fine? Like this was when it was scheduled all along, it should just continue. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, as someone who's not really watched an awful lot of the World Cup, I've got to say, like, I've got a slightly different perspective to you guys who have probably taken a bit more of an interest in it. I think the thing I've taken away from the World Cup is that red arrows somehow get you like so much interaction on Twitter that we should start using them more. I do think.
Hang on, let me note this down. Let me just note that down.
Alex, I think, made a good point with his last one about how there's just been way too much T20 cricket over the last. I get like the backlog of COVID and like tournaments and series that sides have had to play. I get that, but to me it just feels like there's verging on too much T20 cricket, so I can sort of understand it from that point. I think probably from my point of view, I think I haven't really seen a lot of the games, and the atmosphere on social media has kind of been quite dampened in a way. Sort of, there hasn't been a lot of, again, this is because of me not looking at it, but I haven't seen an awful lot of stuff on Twitter unless it's for the wrong reasons. Hint, hint, red arrows. But yeah, you've got the inter-country rivalries, which are interesting. I think it's safe to say. We'll just leave it at that. So yeah, I think probably, I think Alex probably hit it on the head the most. The fact it's not really Australian cricket season. We've had so much T20 cricket, it's kind of been rammed down our throats. You know, England, we did a 7-match T20 series against Pakistan as a warm-up, to only then face Pakistan again in a further warm-up before we played in the World Cup, sort of. And we had a 3-match T20 preparation series against Australia. Kind of like, what's the point? What is the point there?
Yeah, I agree. And Alex, I want to pick you up on, because obviously you're talking about the scheduling. Now, one thing I saw you tweeting about the other day was the rain and players being brought on too soon. How much has the weather impacted this World Cup? And do you think, obviously that tweet caused a bit of controversy, but do you stand by that, saying that at the end of the day, the players were brought on too soon and it feels like the umpires are, you know, trying to get a game on as much as time, because there will be a balance. People will say, well, the umpires want to get a game on for the fans, but does player safety always come first? And have you been concerned about that in this World Cup?
I've been concerned, and I do stand by that tweet. I saw an Australian journalist tweeted the other day saying, was the rain any worse in that game, the India game, than it was in the England-Australia game? That was a complete washout, of course, and was just as important in terms of the group stage. And, you know, if you look from an Australian point of view, there is a high chance that they're now not going to qualify effectively and potentially because of that game. And do I think they've been consistent? No. Has the rain possibly been over-exaggerated, the effect of the weather? Probably yes. Let's face it, unless we're playing a World Cup.
We love a moan
in
about
UAE
rain.
every year.
Everyone loves a moan about rain.
Yeah, of course they do. Unless we're playing the World Cup in the UAE every year, which nobody wants, then there is a high chance that a couple of the games are going to be affected by rain. Now it's pot luck whether those games are, you know, less important, meaningless wooden spoon group games, whether it's a, you know, crunch match between your top two in the group that decides who goes through and who doesn't. That's kind of just luck of the draw. And some teams will feel a lot more hard done by than others. And it probably didn't help that India were probably benefited from that rain break and the fact that they were bought. I think there won't be many people who will dispute the fact that if the rain break doesn't happen when it does, Bangladesh probably go on to win that game, which would have been massive for them. But obviously they didn't. Now, whether people can argue about factors of that rain break and umpires and did it benefit India, did it not off field, whatever, doesn't bother me. But I do think they've been a little bit inconsistent. I do think player safety has to come first at all times. Even if, you know, if we have to sacrifice 2 overs, we have to sacrifice 2 overs. I think the players would much rather it be that way. I think the fans would much rather it be that way. It does seem a little bit needless and a little bit careless with the rain so far in this tournament.
Yeah, so from player safety to talking about actual players, did you see that seamless transition there? Harrison, who's impressed you in this World Cup? Who have you seen who thought they're playing good cricket, they've been consistent, or a team as a whole, in your opinion?
I mean, there's many to choose from here, but I'm going to pick on the hat-trick hero from earlier today, Josh Little. He's been excellent from the word go in the in the first round stage, and then in his last 3 games he's faced England, Australia and New Zealand. He's taken 7 wickets across those 3 games against arguably 3 of the best teams in world cricket right now, and it's just a great display of what players who play for small nations are capable of, and they are on that level the bigger nation players are, and can cause them trouble on their day. And that probably fits in as well with how I felt about Ireland. I think they've done quite well. I wonder it from the Afghanistan perspective as well, but what if their game against Afghanistan didn't get rained off? Who would have won that? That could have had a bit more of an effect on qualification and whatnot. But Little and Ireland particularly have caught my eye throughout.
Yeah, and on those minor nations, there's been, well, minor, that's probably not the right word to say, smaller nations. Oh, yeah, associate nations. On them, there's been a lot of debate going on about how many nations should play in a World Cup. How many of these smaller nations should we involve? And what do you think about the balance of this? And I'll put this to Rob and then Alex. What do you think about the balance of the amount of teams that we've got in this World Cup and the smaller nations? Do you like that involvement? Do you think there should be more? Do you think there should be less? What's your thoughts?
I think more is the answer. For me, it feels weird having a tournament like a World Cup, and after the group stage, you go straight into, what is it, semi-final? For me, that's odd. You know, maybe it's because I've been brought up more with football, and then you have the whole round of 16 and quarterfinal, semi-final, and then the final. I appreciate that cricket, I don't think, is really in that position to make it a full-blown 32-team tournament and go, yeah, we'll have a round of 16, quarterfinals, semi-finals, whatever you want to call it. But I do think, look, if you're saying less, effectively what you're saying is you want less people playing on a big stage. And what of those players who, you know, fully associate nations, they're not full-time. They have to work alongside this. So for me, I think you need to get as many teams as you can involved. And hopefully you'll see more upsets like Ireland did to England, like Bangladesh probably would have done to India, because they're just playing higher quality opponents more often. I think that's a thing, probably a whole different point, but the top three, the big three, need to stop fucking just playing each other. Fucking go back. Like England went to the Netherlands this summer, played 3 ODIs. We need more of that. We need more of the big nations going to these associate nations and going, look, we'll play 3 tests, 3 ODIs, and 3 T20s. And like, we'll take as many of our best players as we can. Obviously, I know franchise cricket is putting a real stranglehold on and kind of bringing it to a boil over agreements of who's going to play for who and everything like that. But I think where possible, to link back to the original point, you need probably more countries, I think, than we have now. I think for me, you probably ideally want to go from the group stage to a quarter-final, then a semi-final, then a final. For me, group stages into semi-final just feels a bit too short.
Alex, would you agree with that? Would you like to see a slight restructuring in how this World Cup works? Obviously, you've got the Super 12 and then the bit before it. I always feel personally that that's a bit disjointed in the thing. I think we just throw them all in. What are your thoughts on the way in which the tournament's structured?
I think it's a bit of a slap in the face to the smaller nations, for want of a better word. The fact that having qualified for a World Cup, they then have to go through another qualifier. That makes no other tournament, no other sport does that ever. You don't qualify for something and then go through a qualifier. It's nuts.
Yeah, and it's just disrespectful, isn't it? Because you think you'd never
ridiculous.
see. Would you ever see Australia, India, England doing that? They would never get into the qualification stage.
And it doesn't surprise me that the bigger nations who have gone into that, the likes of the West Indies, Sri Lanka, who, let's face it, from a financial point of view, are smaller, so they don't really get a say in it. To be honest, they've kind of been told what to do, and they have actually found it a lot more difficult, I think, than they were expecting. You look at the West Indies; they didn't even make it through. So the whole argument of restricting Cricket World Cups to a small number of teams, you saw with the 50 over World Cup, what was it, 9 teams at the 2019 tournament, because they want the best v best, and if you have best v best, everybody plays each other, therefore you get the overall right winner. Maybe that's the case. You could probably argue that at that time, England, New Zealand were probably the best 2 white ball teams. They ended up playing each other in the final. So yes, that format arguably works if you want that. But to me, that's not what a World Cup is about. A World Cup is not about deciding who's been the best white ball team for 4 years or whatever. A World Cup, the whole point, the love of a World Cup is anyone can beat anyone. You can get knocked out if you have a bad day. And it's just about peaking and at the right time and playing your best cricket at the right time. I like that they expand the next one in 2 years, I believe, which is another ridiculous point. The fact that we're having a World Cup every 2 years now is stupid. But the next one is 20 teams. I would like it to be 24. I think 24 within kind of 4, 6, 8 years, whatever they're doing it now. I think 24 would be a good amount. You look at the sides who have made it to this World Cup. They haven't underperformed. Ireland have been brilliant. Namibia were fantastic to watch in the qualifying stage. The Netherlands have been good. Zimbabwe have been brilliant. Afghanistan, you could argue Afghanistan have underperformed. That's the expectation of these smaller nations now. Both Afghanistan and Ireland, obviously full member nations, but you could even argue Afghanistan have underperformed and they very nearly beat Australia today. That is the level that these teams have now got to, and it is unfair for the ICC, the BCCI, the ECB, and Cricket Australia to treat them as smaller nations who we can just basically use as throwaways until we get to the main event. And as Rob touched on, the fact that the Super 12, which is effectively the group stage, let's be honest, the fact that you then have that and go straight into a semi-final is nuts. You should have probably smaller groups and then go through to a quarter-final, as he said. It would be a lot more interesting. I think people would pay a lot more attention to it, and it would probably result in better cricket, more entertainment, and better crowds.
And on that positive note, let's move on to talking about England themselves and their performance in the T20 World Cup. It's been a bit of a mixed bag so far. It's felt a bit disjointed for me, mainly because I've not been watching it because I've been lying in bed and I don't have Sky because I'm a student. But Harrison, we'll come to you first for this. What do you think England have done well so far in this World Cup? What do you think they've done badly? And what are your general where we're at? What do you think of where we're at with England at this current point? Obviously, we're recording this on Friday. England have a must-win game tomorrow, but let's be real, this will probably go out but after that match. But Harrison, your thoughts, please.
I think in general, their bowling has been the high point of the whole tournament, bar the first 10 overs against Ireland, where you could argue that match was lost because no runs were scored like that in the whole game. Sam Curran in particular stood out as one of the leading wicket takers in the Super 12 stage. The batting itself has been hit or miss. First two games it didn't fire, but then New Zealand the other day it showed the old signs of what we've become accustomed to with England. Butler and Hales at the top scoring runs and a bit more power and through the order and stuff. So it's been a bit of underwhelming, I think is a good way to put it, but we very much righted the ship after the New Zealand game, and now going into Sri Lanka tomorrow, you'd expect England to pull off the win and get through to the semi-finals, but there's always that trepidation with any side in the World Cup, but especially England, when we know what record they have in any sport in major tournaments.
Yeah, we don't have much luck, do we? One thing that's I've seen a lot on Twitter and just everywhere in the press and everything is talking about Jos Buttler's captaincy. Obviously, he's very new in where we are, and Rob's rolling his eyes already.
Why is this a question? Why?
Well, because I think it's a fair question. I think it's a fair question to ask about captaincy and the role of Jos Buttler. He is only very new in this thing. So I'm going to come to you for your thoughts, seeing as you feel so strongly about it, Rob. What do you think about Jos Buttler as captain? Yes or no?
It's 100% yes. You back him to the hill. You back him to the hills. You back him to anything. Like, he was picked out. When did Owen Morgan retire? Last year? Earlier this year? From white ball cricket?
May.
So, earlier this year. Jos Buttler had been picked out as future captain of this white ball side before the 2019 World Cup. So he's now been waiting 3 years, and he's led England in bit parts when Morgan's rested himself, or as turned out to be the case last game in the Netherlands series, had basically decided he was done with international cricket. Jos has led the side. I don't think there are many issues. I think people look at what Mo and Ali does as a vice captain, and I think Mo is the perfect vice captain for Jos. They work off each other really well. You know, Morgan would always stand at mid on or mid off and be talking to his bowlers about going through the plans and stuff. That's what Jos entrusts Moeen with, you know, to save that time running between running up and down the wickets. Well, I think if people are making way too much mystery of that anyway, it's sort of England planned for it. They knew what they were doing when they gave Jos the captaincy. I did find it interesting during the hundreds that Jos effectively said to Phil Salt, I want you to keep, and I'm going to captain in the field to see what it was like. That then potentially, questioned, will Phil Salt play in the World Cup 11? Will he be the keeper? I don't think there should be many questions around Jos's captaincy whatsoever. I think the guy, I would highly recommend anyone who does listening to the High Performance podcast episode that he's on. It's presented by Jake Humphrey and someone else who I've forgotten the name of. I do apologize.
You can't plug other people's podcasts on me.
I can and I will, mate. But basically, they talk about the benefits or like how someone naturally introverted, like Jos openly admits, can still be very powerful as a leader. And I remember I wrote an article on this. Owen Morgan openly said Jos Buttler and Ben Stokes for the white ball side set the standards. They're the ones that are pushing everything in training. They're the ones that are doing extra work. Chris Wokes has just done a piece in the Guardian today. I think he got interviewed, and he said, "I've seen a confidence in Josh Butler, in his captaincy. Sort of, I've noticed some changes." Which you mentioned that he's new to it, so of course he's going to go through a learning phase. When you're new to anything, you're going to go through a learning phase. But this is a guy who's 31, 32, who's been around the international scene for God knows how long. Ever since I've been into cricket, Josh Butler has been playing for England. So experience counts for a lot, and I don't think that. I think everyone looks too much into social media at times. And England white ball setup has been brilliant since 2015, 2016. And therefore they should have gained the fans' full trust. So why are people still now going, well, I don't think Josh should be captain? I think I can see the point. I don't agree with them. And for me, I think you back Josh Butler as captain until his form runs off a cliff, until you can't pick him anymore, a la Owen Morgan, or he openly steps back and says he doesn't want it anymore. But for me, Josh Butler is the right person to lead this England side.
I mean, I would agree for you, but I'm going to play devil's advocate a bit here. And there would be some people who'd say, you look at this summer, this home summer, we didn't have a successful summer. We haven't really won any games. I mean, I went to the India ODI at Old Trafford, and that was an absolute shambles, to be quite frank with you. We didn't really compete with them, and it was over in less than 30 overs or something like that. Alex, people at home, people watching this might be saying, if it's he's lost these games over the summer at home, and he's had a bit of a shaky T20 World Cup because it's been up and down, they might be saying, surely it's time to look elsewhere. Maybe Moeen Ali is the man. What would you say to that?
I would say cricket fans are very, very fickle indeed. I think a lot of people have overlooked the fact that we had a brand new coach at the start of the summer. Matthew Mott had stepped into the reins. I think he openly has admitted that it's taken him a little bit of time to get used to it. You had a new leadership partnership with him and Josh Butler. Matthew Mott he's openly said, even at this World Cup, that the first couple of games, perhaps we were a little bit timid at times, which is just something that people and England fans probably weren't used to us being. Owen Morgan's mantra as captain has always been fearless cricket. And, we will just go out, we'll whack everything. If we get bowled out for 30, we get bowled out for 30, but we'll score 300 the other 8 games. Whereas I think Butler and Mott's approach has perhaps been slightly more measured chaos, if that's a phrase. I think they're trying to.
I don't think it is a phrase. Just to put it out there.
Yeah, well, we can make it up. But I think they're just trying to harness the way. I don't think they quite are the full, gung ho approach that Morgan was. But at the same time, we're not just going to go into our shell. Yes, okay, we had a poor summer. Everyone's allowed a poor summer once in a while. Would it have been nice to probably win at least one of those series? Yes, but let's be honest, we were playing South Africa and India, who are 2 of the best white ball sides in the world. You look at Group 2 in the T20 World Cup at the moment, who are the top 2? India and South Africa. So there's a high chance that they both make it through to the semi-finals. So, I think people had unrealistic expectations of Josh. The second, as a team, we started to lose games, all focus went straight onto him as captain, which I think is wrong. I don't think he's the fault of a lot of what's going on with England. And the other issue he had was he is the successor to Morgan, which is always going to be a little bit of a poison chalice. Whoever it was going to have a little bit of a tough time because they are replacing arguably England's greatest ever captain. But in the circumstances, I think he's done quite well.
I think for me, for me as well, the injuries can't be understated.
Sorry, just
Danny's
zoom in. Yeah, come on, speed up, lads.
The injuries as well. We still don't have Jofra Archer. Johnny Bairstow's been ruled out of this World Cup, so he's a huge loss. You lose Reece Topley on the eve of the tournament, who's been a resurgence for England's white ball bowling department. You're trying to get Harry Brook settled in an England side, which he's now starting to look, but that takes time for someone else to come into it. And overall, I think Alex hit on the head. England fans are fickle. They're fickle in terms of you lose 1-2 games. Everyone's like, Josh needs to go. It's like, give it time to settle in. And I think we just need to be patient with it. And overall, winning cures everything. If Joss Butler had a 100% win record, is anyone talking about his captaincy? Fuck no. So give it time, trust the process. Only when we start falling off a cliff and there doesn't seem to be any changes made to reverse it is when I think you can start having reasonable doubts.
Right. So just quickly then, because I do want to get onto the England women's central contracts. Yes or no answer. Are England winning this World Cup? Harrison, Burridge, yes or no?
Yes.
Rob?
Yeah.
Alex?
Heart yes, head no.
No. Yes or no. It's not heart and head. I didn't ask that. Yes or no?
I'm going no, because I'm always optimistic and I say England are always going to win it and then we don't. So I'm just going to go no.
Tell surprise, I'm also going no. I think, mark my words, people, we're losing to Sri Lanka tomorrow. That's what's happening. Right, let's move on to the central contracts for the England women then. 18 central contracts have been awarded. The list, which I will fire off really, really quickly, are Tommy Bowman, Lauren Bell, Catherine Brunt, Atlas Capsey, Kate Cross, Freya Davies, Sophia Dunkley, Sophie Eccleston, Tash Farron, Sarah Glenn, Amy Jones, Freya Kemp, Heather Knight, Emma Lamb, Nat Siver, Izzy Wong and Danny Wyatt. I'm sure I've missed someone there. But let's quickly go to you, Harrison. Brief answer from you. Professional females in England up to 98 with this. How good is it to see the ECB investing in women's cricket, and how strong are these central contracts?
It's fantastic to see it. Really, they've deserved the investment in the game for a long time now, and the 100 has given it that platform to elevate it further, and obviously pushed on to the ECB bosses that they need this extra money to take that game to the next level on parallel with what we've got in men's county cricket, and to have just shy of 100 professional cricketers after the number it was going into this season. It's just fantastic, really, especially some of the names you've got in the England list now, the youngsters that have come through this year being given that safety net as such, and that money to keep playing the game is fantastic.
Yeah, and there have been some omissions, of course. Winfield Hill, Maddie Villiers, Katie George, and Georgia Elvis left out. Alex, sorry. Do you think that they've been hard done by that decision, or do you think in terms of the form we've seen over the summer, the right decisions have been made over these central contracts?
I think there's a few who probably can feel they've been hard done by. I'm a big fan of Maddie Villiers. I think she's always performed, certainly at county level, at franchise level in women's cricket, and then at international level, I think she's very talented. But at the same time, the likes of probably Charlie Dean's probably skipped ahead of her. I think Lauren Winfield Hill has probably had her chances at England. And what I am a fan of, as difficult as it is, the common criticism of women's cricket has always been they're a little bit too soft on the players. They kind of, it doesn't matter if they're out of form because these are our players and they'll come back in. Whereas now I think we are getting to a stage of professionalism and criticism, and I like the fact that it's open for criticism. If a player isn't performing well, they will be dropped. And I think that's a really good sign. And I think as a team, because of that change in attitude, the team will move forward. So whilst I'm disappointed and I do feel sorry for those who've been left out, at the same time, there are some really talented people in that list, and there are some really talented youngsters coming through.
Yeah, and just quickly, Rob, we've seen a transition in this England women's side. How encouraging do you think these central contracts are looking ahead to the Ashes next year, and of course everything that's coming up for them?
It's nice to see the ECB do something positive for the women's game, and in such a large statement as it is, it's been long overdue. And now I just hope that they back it up now with more and more support for the women's game. As someone who wasn't really into women's cricket before the summer, I've been able to watch it as it's gone on and get more into it. I think it's a great move, as you mentioned, with the Ashes coming up, the women's Ashes coming up next year. Obviously, I think it was key that it was one of probably the ECB's priorities to make sure they had a settled list of players on central contracts. As Alex say, I echo his thoughts of very disappointed for the girls that have missed out on them. But unfortunately, they can't reward everyone. If they're taking them this long now to get to central contracts, everyone knows that the ECB isn't exactly the best at doing what is good for English cricket. no certain franchise tournament implicitly mentioned, but we all know what it is. You know, it's nice to see them do a positive action for once, and you know, congratulations to go to have got them. I think it's really important for the stability of the game. As Harrison mentioned, the numbers now of professional cricketers from the start of the year to now is going to be good. And also, if you can be it, you can see it. Think about all the young girls that have gone to cricket from us winning the 2019 World Cup, therefore then following the women's side and getting into there, and all the local schemes, you know, like what Ebony Rainford Brent is doing, I think is outstanding with it. So you've got to think about the next generation. I think and it just goes back to the thing I said, if you can be it, you can see it. All the young girls now, they'll be reading the news about how their cricketing heroes have got central contracts, which is a huge step for them. You know, who does not, they go, I want to be her, I want to be like her, and that will then get them involved. So I think it's a really good move overall to kind of, it's a good move in a difficult period, but overall, yeah, it's a fantastic move.
Fantastic. And you've wrapped that answer up just in time so the Zoom meeting doesn't finish. Thank you very much for joining us, boys. It's been a pleasure to talk. We might do this again, we might not. If it fails and nobody watches it, then it's going in on the bin, like those old Friday night spaces we tried once. What a throwback. Thank you very much, boys, and we'll see you later.